Good evening, everybody. Professor Roop here, and thank you for tuning in on the Apostolic Church History Podcast. It airs every week, Friday at 7 p.m. American Standard Time, Central Time. And today we have a special guest. Dr. Sheila Whitlock is joining us today, and she's going to tell you about her background, her teaching career, how she found Pentecost and what she thinks of the Pentecostal church today, and all kinds of good things. So, Dr. Sheila Whitlock, thanks for joining us today, and I want you to take your liberty and say all you want to say to us today.
Okay. All right. Well, recently I spoke at a women's conference. I was one of a string of speakers. I tend not to ever give my background or ever talk about myself. I don't feel like you got to build a resume up if you've got the message from the Lord. However, in this women's conference, I was very impressed about two women who went ahead of me talking about their background, what they had to share, because they came out of a recovery program. They'd overcome something in their life. And while I'm sitting there listening to the miracles of the Lord, I thought, I've got miracles in my life. And the reason I was brought there and what I talked about that day was overcoming cancer and my voice. I had throat cancer, and it was a miracle that I have my voice today. So I spoke a little bit then about my background because it came to me I need to talk about a little bit something more than the voice, the cancer. And I realized at that point in time I need to talk about my upbringing and where I came from. Only time I'd ever talked about it was at that woman's conference, and I'm going to share today because I had promised I would do a little video and talk about that, and I never did it. I just became self-conscious again. But growing up, I grew up in eastern Ohio. My mom and dad's from Kentucky. And the steel industry was going good, back in the time that I grew up. I was born in 1957 and in Akron, Ohio. And I'll tell you, my family had this concept and this idea of living off the land. They'd been living through the Depression in Appalachia. They didn't have much, and they knew how to make something out of nothing. So I grew up with that lifestyle. And today, you folks call that off the grid. Or you even call it Amish-style living. So I was raised that way. And we kind of kept it quiet. It was never well known that we didn't have the indoor plumbing and things like that. And there was a shame factor with it. But I overcame poverty, is what I told the ladies at that women's conference. I said, I never thought I'd go to college. You were raised to marry a preacher, because I was raised in the United Pentecostal Church in Akron's where I got the Holy Ghost at the age of 13 with the evidence of speaking in tongues. At that church we were visited. And I was raised in the Alliance, Ohio church. We had a wonderful minister there. Well, actually a couple of them, but Brother Homer Gibson is still preaching, and he's down in West Virginia, if any of you are in the area, in Flatwoods, West Virginia, and he's a great preacher. And he had some family members that was my youth pastor. His name was Jerry Colgrove, and people know him as Alfred Colgrove. And he's retired from the ministry. He married my best friend Charlene Lilly, and they live down in the Carolinas. They have a beautiful family, and they've served the Lord all their lives. And so it's a beautiful story, a love story there. I was surrounded by people that were holy people. My father did not go to church, except like most people do today. They go, at Christmas time, and and Easter time, and at the insistence of the children usually. So my father didn't really go to church, so I had a balance in my home sometimes, but he supported my mother in going to church. And so, we had a good upbringing that way, learning how to be self-sufficient. And my dad gave me the inspiration to be self-sufficient. He said you need to have a skill when you graduate high school so that you're not dependent upon any other person. And so I did graduate with high honors and secretarial skills, spelling. I was a national spelling champion. I didn't have much living out in the country. Our entertainment was, for me, a dictionary and the Bible. And I tell you what, I loved to study both. I had just a desire to read, to learn, to study words. And I didn't realize it till later on in life. God puts us in circumstances of where He's going to take us to. And as I listened to those women at the conference, He helped them overcome specific things that at the time they thought were something they had to endure. And they wanted out of it. They wanted deliverance. And instead, He was chastening them. He was building them so that they could be strong to lead others out of those circumstances. Being rescued sometimes in those situations is not what people are asking for. When you're deep in the throes of where you're at, you don't realize that, wow, there's a better life out there. I didn't really desire to go to college. I desired to have a successful work career, and I continued to pursue that. I did end up getting some scholarships and moving forward in the educational field that way. Those scholarships were good. I was able to raise my family. I have one daughter. I worked a job at the same time. But the thing that I had missing in my life, I felt that would move me forward and advance me in a work career. Never once did I consider that it was going to do anything in leadership in the church. So it was a separate part of my being and my person. So I pursued, and I once again excelled in school. I won state awards. I graduated top of a class in a large school. I did the same in college. Did exceptionally well. It was a gift that I had undermined, I think. My degrees at that time were in the sciences. I had an interest to work in the field of mental retardation, developmental disabilities, and family counseling. So I did a dual program. I was doing jail ministry, and so I also did some minors in criminal justice. So I had a little bit of legal background, psychology, the sciences, neuropsychology, some biology, and that was very interesting how that all unfolded then from there. My career options, moving from a secretarial field, doing that midlife change into the mental health field. And I advanced rapidly. I had no designs to go anywhere up the ladder into administration. I wanted to work hand in hand with people. And an opportunity happened, and I moved in and advanced to become an administrator, executive director of a healthcare company serving Northwest Ohio, where I had gone to college at Defiance College. I married and lived over there. I was not going to church at that time. I was very involved in work and just life. And eventually, a few years passed, and a pastor friend of ours. He said he was going to start a church up again in his 80s, and we were just so fortunate to be a part of that process as he built his church and get back to church again. And that's when things in our lives really began to change and take a little bit of a turn. There was health issues, and it seems like you have a target on your back the moment you decide you're going to be in leadership in serving the Lord. And so I had overcome poverty, was able to get an education. I had moved up in the men's world where I lived at. It was mostly men serving those positions. So, I was breaking a few glass ceilings through the process of my work career. And now I'm looking at going full force at studying the Bible more. And I was asking questions all the time. And I was feeling so overwhelmed that every corner I turned, there was some kind of a man answering questions, and they'd give me their thoughts. And I'm like, well, can't you cite it better for me? And I think they were doing the best they could. These were ministers that were doing the best they could. They didn't have the answers either. They just thought, this is what I've always been taught. It was at this point I searched out and I pursued learning the biblical languages. I think we all start at this point. We say, well, I just want to learn the Greek. I come to find out there's more than the Bible being written in Greek. And I won't get into all of that, but I have studied Aramaic, Syriac Aramaic, Imperial Aramaic, the Paleo-Hebrew, Hebrew, the Greek, Koine Greek, and some classical Greek. And what we find is there's many dialects, many time periods of these languages. Well, the hunger in me was, and it came to me so easy. I was doing this at an online Bible seminary school. And once again, the Lord provided. He gave me good people that would barter with me on my education, so I didn't have to fork the money out as much as it could have cost. Moving forward in those languages, though, I had a hunger to find out, okay, culturally, I'm learning. Archaeologically, I'm learning. There's more to than just the words you might find in a lexicon. And I tell you, the deeper and deeper that we study, the more hungry we get. It's pretty exciting what God will reveal. You've got to get your mindset out of the way. I never had a mindset of rescue me from poverty, rescue me from cancer, rescue me. I just wanted to go forward because God put me. He's in control of my life. I don't have any doubts of that. And He'll take care of me. And He'll lead me through that. And He did. Through the cancer, there were people that, I witnessed to, I prayed with. There was a whole lot of a ministry there that I did speak about that several times at different churches. God put me in those circumstances for a reason. And I'll tell you, I'm thankful for the experience that my Lord gave me. He knew I could endure that. And then lead people out of that. Because there's people there that don't have the Lord in their lives and they're fearful. We find that with the ladies that were speaking at the conference. How can a girl like me who's been raised in church do a jail ministry? I tried. But I'll tell you, a girl that can do a jail ministry is one who's been there, one who's been through all of that, who has been abused, who turned to drugs, who got into gangs, who ended up in jail, and then gave her life to the Lord. That is the circumstances sometimes we endure. And then it's a ministry that we end up with. People just need to understand sometimes we're over-judgmental about individuals who have a past. And I'm going to give you just a little bit of what my books are about. A lot of my books are about things in relation to how we need to take as a Christian and change. Oh, here, Bill's got some of them. Change our perspectives. This one right here, Women of God, it's not about a person. This is about an idea or a concept. How can we incorporate the good and the bad of somebody into our lives and make changes? And I'm going to tell you, there's people out there that are just too, and Bill, Brother Roop, he gave a very good example of this the other day. I love the term he used, pedigrees. We have pedigrees within the Pentecostal church in particular, the apostolic group of people. My daddy was a preacher, my grandpa was a preacher, and the women, it's vied to be the pastor's wife, and they call themselves the first lady, and they're called the queen mother, and I've heard everything going around to different churches. And while y'all have, your culture and you can do what you want, I would rather take one of the women that I saw at that women's conference who's overcome obstacles. They're not given prestigious positions within some of the churches, and that's my goal, is to speak and write about how can we be more loving and Christ-like in what we do. What we have is people who have those pedigrees, and they overlook people within the building that can give them so much in ministry. Don't underestimate that they haven't been there for 20 years. I've watched them and worked with prayer groups over the past, I'd say 3-4 years now. I started Bible studies out of my home. I was a lay pastor for a brethren church, and I would fill in for the minister when he'd be gone, the pastor. I'd do the Bible studies, the Sunday school, whatever. The people there really liked my method of teaching. They thought, and I guess it's because it's just object life lessons. Let's take it and apply it. What I've found is I could offer some Bible study series that were in my heart, and I'd pray about them, study about them, and I ended up just doing them at my house. And the response was so great, I ended up having to travel town to town because I couldn't get them all in my house. And the brethren pastor was unwilling to allow me to use the church. He felt it was a conflict. And so I just went around to all these different groups in all these towns, and as a result, multiple prayer groups and Bible studies began. There's a group of people out there that don't want to come in to a more formal service in a building, but are so willing to come to a home church in a less threatening environment. So I've taken and written these little introductory books here. I began first with this one here when I was working on my master's degree in Jewish study. This one's called the Shulamite, and it's a study guide, and it's used in franchise nursing homes, actually. And it's taking a look at the Song of Songs in a new way of how we can make that applicable to our life today. Because preachers don't want to preach on that or teach on that. They say, oh, it's just a love book. It's more than that. So I took and started out with that study while I was in cancer treatment. I was invited to do that, and I could talk about that maybe in another podcast. I went from there into teaching Thriving in Babylon. It was one of my first series I did. We're living in a wicked world today. And how do we as Christians survive in that wicked world? Jeremiah told the people, he said, God's telling you when you go into captivity that you need to build houses and plant gardens. He was saying you're going to have to endure and exist in bad circumstances. And while you're there, maybe it was in these prayer groups that these people started emerging. The Hispanic community, many ladies have lived in abuse all their lives, from the home front to the marriage front, and they were not well educated. I had women in these groups that didn't know how to read, that were maybe 50s, in their 50s. They were just doing the best they could to work at a factory. There's people that have endured in very bad circumstances and yet somehow survived. And I think they can go back out, and they started doing that in those prayer groups and leading others to the Lord. There is hope besides drinking and alcoholism. There's hope besides drugs. God can replace those things. So Thriving in Babylon became quite a launch point for the prayer groups and the ministries. And I have, I would say, 3 Hispanic women who went out and started home churches and Bible studies as a result of that, and had great attendance. So it's very interesting how the Lord will use you, how you can overcome those circumstances. And through that process, there were churches out there that weren't well receiving of some of these people. The first thing they look at is the outside when they come in. And I'm guilty of that myself. And I ask the Lord to help me get through that. And every time, something comes up, He'll show me. You've got that Pentecostal, apostolic prejudice in your head again. You need to get rid of it. And I think we're getting to a point now as I get older that I'm more aware of my prejudices and getting rid of that pedigree, because I didn't grow up with a preacher dad or any of that, but I grew up with a long history in the church. And we overlook sometimes where people never had that. And we need to be forgiving and inclusive to them. Bring them on board. Don't say, well, you've got to go to Bible school and you've got to go training here and jump through all these hoops before you can. There's women I met right out the gate that had ministry. So that's one of the things that I right now have been developing in my Bible studies, as the Lord gives me plenty of time to work on them. The books that I'm writing, the first books that I pass out to people is, Does God Hear Me? And it's just a short story, a life story, a personal experience. And that's one of the things, even as somebody who's looking to serve the Lord, they're saying, I don't even know if God's hearing me anymore. I asked Him to heal me. I asked Him to save my sister. I asked Him to pay my rent. You know what? This book is a good book that helps you understand God is with you. He is there. He's got you in some circumstances sometimes that He wants you to be in, because He's developing you to be somebody in His kingdom. And if you can't have that happen in the group you're in, then it's time to look at some other groups that can happen. One of the last things I'll talk about here is the message that I got in regards to my studies and my books right now. We're looking at juxtaposition. We've always preached on, Esther, women of the Bible, Ruth, women of the Bible. And a year ago, I decided I was learning a lot from the unnamed women of the Bible. I was learning from the bad girls of the Bible. Not how to be bad, but there's a reason these people are in the Bible. And I started a Bible series on that. It was very successful. And then I'm finishing up the book on that right now. I have probably about 11 books I've written. Some are in regards to revelations that I've had, the book of Romans, and some Jewish, and the Ketubah, and the marriage contract. But this last series has just been inspirational to so many people. And I want people to be able to use those as like the Shulamite, to take that into Bible study groups and use them. This year we did the lesser known men of the Bible. And it was amazing how much I had pastors, elders, lay leaders, prison chaplains in the group that were there for the study. Ministerial leadership. They didn't know some of the things I was sharing with them, and they left there so inspired, and I saw their ministries grow as a result of it. So when we take a look at that, I'm going to give you one example before I close. The prodigal son. Who hasn't heard that one preached, the prodigal son, right? What's that prodigal son about, Bill?
Well, it's about the backsliders rejecting God or backsliding and finding his way back home to Jesus' arms.
To a forgiving father.
Yes.
A loving father.
A forgiving father, yes.
Well, what if I say there's another half of that message we've missed? It's the son that wasn't talked about. The son who stayed at home. The son who did the work. Reread that scripture in Luke. I think it's chapter 15, but you reread that. And what you're going to find is a person today, in our church today, in our lives today, in the Pentecostal church today. And that person's going to be a person who says, wait a minute, I've been pedigreed. I'm somebody and I've been here for a long time. I've gone to Bible college. I need to be the one preaching and filling in for the pastor. And then along comes somebody else who doesn't have that background. That would be the prodigal son. Prodigal son says, why did you let that guy back in after all he did wrong?
Right, yeah, right.
Why did you, and contrast that with Jonah. Jonah said the same thing. Why would you forgive Nineveh?
Right.
We need to reevaluate in the church, in the Christian community, where's our Christ-like love?
Well, forgiveness is hard for man. For God, it seems to be easy. For man, it's hard. And also, what about the mother in the prodigal son story? Mm-hmm. How come she's not in there? Mm-hmm. There's a story there as well.
Yeah.
And I think Mother's Day, past Mother's Day, I heard a sermon on that, about the mother, why she wasn't in there. And mm-hmm. It was a wonderful sermon. Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Sheila. This is part 1. We'll do part 2 next week. It's great to hear. It's great to hear somebody else's perspective about churches and Apostolic Church, history of the church, and we forget that man does a lot of teaching, but it's important to hear teaching from women, get women's perspective, because they have a whole different perspective about life, their view of God from the women's perspective, and certainly church history from a women's perspective. And in this podcast, as we go through the episodes, I'll try to bring that out about women in history, women in the podcast, women throughout the 2,000 years of Apostolic Church history. And well, it's great. It's a great treat to have you here.
Thank you.
It's wonderful. It's a blessing for us and a blessing for everybody who's watching. And next week we'll do part 2, and I'm sure everybody will be looking forward to that. And we'll talk about some things in more detail. And thank you for tuning in, everybody. And thank you for watching our special guest. And we will see you next week, Friday, 7 p.m. Central Standard American Time. But these podcasts, of course, are recorded, and you can go on Apostolic Church History YouTube channel and watch them from the beginning. And everybody's busy. Everybody's got a busy schedule, and it's sometimes we just need to watch the recording later. So thank you. Good night, and God bless you.